Well, folks, Halloween has sadly ended for another year. But I wanted to leave this final piece. Now, originally I was going to release this before October 31st, but unfortunately real life got in the way, so this one is a little late, and I apologize for that. But I figured I'd close off my Halloween reviews event with this nice little real talk of horror books or horror movies. Which is better? Now, to give some clarification, I am not the greatest expert on horror. I know a lot of classic horror titles, but unfortunately I'm not the greatest horror expert. So, I will try to remain as unbiased as I possibly can with this one, however. You all deserve that much, and I plan to give that much. So, let's begin. Let's start off with horror movies as a good start. Now, I do not have the greatest experience when it comes to horror movies. I've seen bits and pieces of them here and there, and yet I hear of all the classics. The Shining, Pennywise with the It series. I have seen Friday the 13th. I know of Nightmare on Elm Street. I know of all the classics, even Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I've even heard of many others such as the Purge series, as well as, of course, the Conjuring verse, the very cinematic universe that caused me to avoid horror in the first place. Now I will say this much. When it comes to horror literature, there aren't a great many names that pop up, at least as far as I'm aware. But horror movies, they are immediately stacked up with a lot of classic titles. Now, recently, my girlfriend has actually been telling me to check out more of the classic slasher films. But I've told her that demonic horror films are off the charts for me. I will not dive into those because that's where I draw the line. And if you were to ask me, do I believe that there are spirits in this world? I would say yes. There is a very highly likely probability that they are here. They are among us. Which is why demonic horror films are not my biggest thing, especially when concerning the Annabelle doll. But I can see why it's a big hit in the horror movie franchise. But this brings up a massive problem that I have with horror films nowadays. The simple fact that a good majority of them that involve like demonic horror and stuff like that consistently rely on jump scares. They have their moments of tension, don't get me wrong, but more often than not, they rely on the suddenness of a jump scare to really spook the audience. Which is why I kind of like other films that are unique in this regard, such as slasher films. You know that they're cheesy and over the top, but they do offer a nice little bit of tension in there, especially because you know this killer is coming, and you wonder how are these people going to die in the most horrible ways possible. And not only that, I see again, there are a lot of classics here, whereas horror literature, there is not a lot mentioned there, but I can safely say that there are a lot of good classics of horror literature as well. One of the biggest, of course, being the kids' horror series of Goosebumps by R.L. Stine. I have actually read the books as well as seen the TV show for Goosebumps, and I've even seen the movies. So as you can see, Goosebumps is a classic horror franchise with both regards, books as well as movies and TV shows. As for other horror literature, these nice bits actually got me back into horror to begin with, them being some of George R. R. Martin's short stories, such as Meat House Man, Sand Kings, The Pear-Shaped Man. There are a lot of good titles there. If you have not read George R. R. Martin's Dream Songs series yet, which contains these short stories, then I have actually done a review of it on my channel, and I'll leave you a link in the description down below. But some other nice bits of horror literature that I've recently gotten into has been Hellman Elementary, which has a similar kind of kids' horror vibe to Goosebumps, as well as others such as Nothing But Blackened Teeth, as shown here. And there are quite a few others that I've actually recently picked up. So you can safely say that because of this event, I'm willing to give horror another chance. Now again, demonic horror films are a no-go for me. But slashers, as well as possible, like, serial killer types. I could get into those. I've actually told my girlfriend that I would love to check out the Purge series sometime, both the TV show as well as the films. Let me know what you all think of that series, if it's a good way to start my horror adventure. As for horror literature, you will definitely be seeing more of those pop up on my channel here in the future. Because after reading so many different horror titles throughout the month of October, my interest in horror has been piqued once again. So now I will be checking out both films, TV shows, and even books. But I want to hear from you all. Which would you think is better, horror books or horror movies? Because in my perspective, the answer is neither. Neither one is better than the other. Both have unique alternatives to offer. But I'm getting off topic here. Let's start with horror literature. With this one, I feel like there is a nice bit of tension there. With recent horror films, they've relied a bit more on jump scares, with a nice bit of tension here and there with unique titles. But with horror literature, you always feel on the edge of your seat. Any fellow horror readers out there, you will understand what I'm talking about. You see for a fact that there is this tension that keeps you reading, the rising action as you see these characters interacting with something spooky, whether it be a serial killer or an angry spirit, or something else such as the human condition. And quite honestly, a lot of them kept me hooked from start to finish. George R. R. Martin's Meat House Man and Sand Kings especially left me spooked. And even Nothing But Blackened Teeth, despite the fact that it was a short story, absolutely had me hooked from start to finish. I highly recommend it. And if you've not seen my review for it, go ahead and check it out for yourself. Now, as for others, I will be looking in to see if there are any other novel adaptations of classic horror films, and I'll be checking those out as well. But I will also be checking out the films themselves. Because once again, horror is a new genre that I'm getting back into. And I'm getting back into it with gusto. This last month of reading different horror and understanding it a little more, I've actually had my interest reignited in it. And I cannot wait to cover some future horror titles here on this channel. If you all are excited, or if you have any suggestions for me to check out for classic horror films, or novels, or comics, or what have you, please do not hesitate to tell me in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear any and all suggestions for future reviews, or even just as a nice little pastime. Thank you all once again for listening. This is Rambling Collector, signing off.